there is a growing consensus on the behavior of the international community's response towards conflicts and crises in Africa. There is also this growing consensus among Africans that they should take things into their own hands and use their resource and wisdom to come up with solutions to Africa's troubles. Well, there are many who doubt and question the practicality of this notion. In today's edition, we'll try to answer this question. My guest today is Ambassador Dina, one of Ethiopia's most accomplished career diplomats. Currently, he is a member of Ethiopian House of People Representative and Director General of Public Diplomacy at Ethiopian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He has served his country in many diplomatic missions abroad. Ambassador Dina, welcome to What Matters. It's really a pleasure having you here with us today.
Thank you for inviting me to your program entitled What Matters.
What Matters? In this program, we raise topics that really matter to Africa and Africans.
Well, that's wonderful.
Yes. So, Ambassador, I want to begin by asking you about the notion that whenever problems happen in Africa, the West specifically come with solutions, while Africans, whatever happens elsewhere, are not even considered to be part of the solutions. Why is it?
Well, interesting. You are right. For many problems, if not for all, that arise in our continent, there is tendency of seeking for solutions abroad, especially from the West. This is because of the fact that the African independence perhaps is not maybe complete, and that there is what we call dependency syndrome, be it psychological, physical, economical, whatever. Otherwise, by now Africa should have been mature enough to get rid of its own problems, to overcome its own problems, and to solve its problems by itself instead of looking abroad. I think the cause is the quote-unquote incomplete independence. Though African countries are formally independent, it seems that this independence is not, I'm saying this quote-unquote complete.
Now these days, there is a growing consensus among Africans that Africans should take matter or things into their own hands. What is this notion of African solutions to African problems? Where does it emanate?
Well, definitely this is naturally goes with the fact that if a nation is independent, it should be independent in all circumstances. It should be independent, economic independence. It implies political independence, economic independence, social independence, cultural independence, above all, psychological independence. And now this is lacking somewhere in Africa, and therefore there is a need for African countries to be independent and to take care of their own problems by themselves instead of looking somewhere else for the causes as well as the solutions of their problems. The causes could be somewhere else, but still Africa should take the lead in finding solutions for the problems that arise within the continent. And that is how Africa can be mature, that's how Africa can grow, that's how Africa can be complete. I think the reason for the creation of the organizations like Organization of African Unity, OAU, which precedes the current organization AU, is actually to make Africa independent in all senses. One, complete decolonization of African countries, economic independence, integration among African countries, extra. So I think the need for finding African solutions to African problems, as it is we label it today, is a notion or an idea that time has come for.
What does this notion of African solution to African problems fit in the concept of Pan-Africanism?
Well, it doesn't exclude international relations. It doesn't exclude cooperations with the rest of the world. But it means Africa should lead in finding solutions for the problems that arises within Africa. It should not be misunderstood, by the way. We should be careful. It doesn't mean Africa should run out of or go out of cooperations. Cooperation is important. Relation with the rest of the world is very important. Working with the rest of the world is very important, even when we find solutions to our problems. But Africa should lead instead of going for prescriptions by others. Prescriptions may not feed African gesture. Prescriptions may not feed African interest or may not meet African demand. Therefore, the solutions always should be laid by the African. This is a very notion which prominent Africans have come out with, and particularly nowadays is a notion which Ethiopia is leading because for the problem which have been created in the northern part of Ethiopia recently, Ethiopia has been seeking for African solutions. So this is the idea. This is the idea that time has come for.
Yes, but nonetheless, there are parties from Africa, from abroad, that question the practicality of this notion. They say Africa currently, in its current state, is not capable of mobilizing its resources and facing its problems to come up with this kind of solutions.
The parties that doubt the possibility of getting African solution for African problem or Africa leading a project for its solution, the suspicion or questioning this comes from two angles. One comes from very genuine angle of suspecting African capacity. Given African underdevelopment, given African backwardness, given African economic lagging behind, there may be genuine concerns. But there are concerns which are not genuine, and which are deliberate, and which prescribes always other solutions for the African problems. And I think this concern is wrong. It's a concern that should not be there. It doesn't work. It doesn't serve African interest. In any attempt, in any project, in any design, in any activity, there could be limitations. It doesn't matter. But Africa should start looking for its own solutions. Africa leading its own project. Africa should start finding its own solutions for its own problems by itself. And this is, you can say even it's late, but like they say, it's better to be late than never. So we should start now.
But still, there are even scholars and diplomats, even from Africa, who claim that African governments and institutions are in a perpetual state of fragility, and therefore any security issues that emanate from Africa are source of concern for Western and outside powers. So they claim they have to play a role in whatever happens in Africa. Does this hold any truth at all?
Well, like I've said it earlier, concerns emanate from two sources. There's a concern of the genuine source, suspecting African institutions of being weak. That concern may be addressed, but there is a deliberate hypocrisy. That deliberate hypocrisy is not acceptable. A deliberate hypocrisy intended at permanently keeping Africa dominated, permanently keeping Africa always serving its interests, being served from abroad, being dominated by others. I think that is not deliberate, that is hypocritic, it's wrong, it's misfounded as well.
I know that you are one of many diplomats who ardently believe in African solutions to African problems. In one of your interviews, you said the problem It was about the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. You said, quote, the problem and the river are from Africa, and the solutions should be from Africa. And you also believe that the African Union, AU, should take the lead, the initiative to solving crisis or disagreements such as the GED and the crisis that happened in Ethiopia's north. But there are parties who still believe, strongly believe, the African Union is not in a position to even broker a deal between conflicting parties in Ethiopia and in Africa in general. What's your response to this kind of claims?
Well, you are right. The Grand Renaissance Dam is a case in point where we, Ethiopian leadership, is seeking for African solutions always. We're pushing for it. Uh, at times, this issue of the Grand Renaissance Dam, especially what we call the tripartite dialogue, the tripartite talks between the three countries, Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan, have been pushed away and to go to the rest of the world, out of Africa. But by virtue of our attempts, by Ethiopian attempts, diplomatic success, we brought it back to the African fold. And we still believe that the solutions can be obtained here. Because, as you have already said, this is Africa River. These countries are Africans. The misunderstanding is within an African countries. And so we can find a solution to it. We are mature enough, we are capable of finding solutions to our problems. We should be proud of this. And we appeal to others as well. We have been appealing to the two lower riparian countries, namely Egypt and Sudan, that they should be proud of themselves and they should think that the solution to this problem could be found either through dialogue between three of us, if not by African mediations, which we have already started. And I think we should rise to the occasions of handling our own problems by ourselves. This is what we have been appealing to our colleagues, especially downstream countries. And I hope sooner or later they will hear it and they will positively respond to it. And I'm very much optimistic about it.
So let me take you a bit back to the trilateral negotiations, especially under the auspice of the African Union. And then, as you've said, Ethiopia has been consistent throughout. That it believes in the initiatives, in the capability of the African Union in resolving the issue of the GED and the conflict in the north. But when it comes to the negotiations of the GED, the two countries you mentioned, the downstream riparian countries, Egypt and Sudan, took the matter further to a United Nations Security Council. Ambassador, my question will be, where does this disbelief, distrust, I can say disrespect, come from? Because it should be a source of pride to African countries to come up with solutions to their own problems. Where does this kind of
Well, these are the questions that we have been asking ourselves. It's a puzzle that we could not respond, we could not get a response for. With regard to this GERD issue, from day one, from the beginning of this project, Ethiopia has been always pronouncing the fact that Ethiopia believes in the fact that the GERD, the Nile River, should be a source of the friendship or cooperations of the riparian countries. It should be a source of friendship, not a source of conflict. Now, even with the GERD, with the project, we are saying it's not aimed at hurting anyone, excepting helping Ethiopia for electricity, for getting energy, which we're trying to do. And we have been telling the two riparian countries, our partners there, that even this GERD is to their benefit. We have been trying to show so many advantages that GERD comes with for the Sudanese, for example. Like, as you know, even recently we have been witnessing is Khartoum used to be flooded. This GERD project reduces flood, it reduces sedimentations. So that will help the dams in the riparian countries not from being sedimented, from being hurt. And we have been telling them that they'll get a cheap electricity because of this project. And we have been saying overall, after all, Ethiopia is not interested in hurting them. And this is the issue, this is the idea that we have been taking to all negotiations, on all tripartite negotiations. Despite all these appeals by the Ethiopian side, despite all this positive gesture by our side, there had been attempts by the other sides to take this issue out of the African context, to take it to the rest of the world. Thanks to God, now it has come back. It seems there is a kind of sobering on the part of these friends, because the construction of the Grand Renaissance Dam has continued. The third filling has taken place, and it has been realized, it has been seen that this project cannot be stopped. And this is a project which the time has come for the project that will be completed in a very near future, and definitely will benefit everybody else. That's all. And we'll keep on knocking on others' door. We'll keep on telling the rest of the world the reality on the ground. We'll tell our friends downstream also that this GERD is to their benefit, and we always would like to engage positively. Positive engagement is always on our agenda. We never give up hope on strengthening our relationship, on working towards strengthening our relationship, on working towards understanding each other, and clearing confusions, whatever confusion that comes from whatever sources.
No, Ambassador, despite Ethiopia's efforts um, and its insistence on solutions from Africa, solutions from within, Ethiopia has been dragged to UN Security Council many times, and that was unprecedented. Uh, with the issue of the GERD, with the issue of the conflict in the northern part, Ethiopia has been in the UN Security Council many times, and that has never happened almost to any country. And this begs the question: don't we need representation? Doesn't Africa need representation in the UN Security Council?
Yeah, with regard to this issue of Africa being represented in the Security Council, the agenda has been out there for years. The need for fair representations, for representations of the African countries in the UN Security Council, where international agenda, international issues is being dealt with. The issue which we are concerned about as well is an idea that is out there. And all those African representatives and others also raise these issues at the UN forum and other forums as well. And we hope sooner or later, one day, the international community will hear it, and the rest of the world will pick this agenda and definitely realize it. But now, each African leadership, including our leadership, recently has been raising it time and again. And we are knocking at others' door. We are telling the rest of the world that, look, the UN Security Council can be fair if it is represented by the rest of the world, including African countries and others. Africa has not been represented there yet. And this agenda is evolving. Hopefully, this is the agenda that others will hear to it, and will definitely realize one sooner or later.
Well, Ethiopia has been in the UN Security Council so many times and defending itself, defending its interests. And there were also African countries in same Security Council, maybe standing by Ethiopia. Some. So, what was the role of those African countries in the context of African solutions to African problems? Were there
Well,
any helpful?
definitely, African countries come to UN Security Council as non-permanent members. But the African countries who got a chance or opportunity to go to the UN Security Council as non-permanent members, including Ethiopia, they raised this issue. they raise African issues. They always raise the issues that will make African UN Security Council a fair institution, UN Security Council representative of the rest of the world. However, it has not been yet realized. And, still, Africans and other countries from Latin America have kept coming to the UN Security Council now and then as non-permanent members for sometimes, and there is no continuity, and that continuity will be there if Africa becomes member of Security Council as well, together with the rest of the world. Latin Americans also have these issues, so that the UN Security Council, the UN in general, will be a fair institution where everybody will be represented.
There was a Kenyan permanent representative at the UN once, explicitly supporting Ethiopia trusting Ethiopia to resolve its own issues. By issues, I mean the conflict in North. So, were there such kind of instance?
Well, there are African countries also have been supporting us in the Security Council, those non-permanent members. It's not only that, there are members of the permanent members of Security Council also who have been supporting Ethiopia there, obviously, especially when this Ethiopian northern issues has come to the UN Security Council forum. And we expressed our gratitude to them at the time, and they are friends, and what they have done is fair. The good thing is nowadays, others also, those who were hesitating from accepting the Africa to handle this issue, have started realizing the reality and have started saying they also support the African initiative. And this is actually it's a breakthrough, it's a diplomatic success on the part of Ethiopia and Ethiopian friends. And now, recently, especially the northern issue as being handled by the African situation, is being supported by others as well. Those who have been hesitating, those who have been insisting on bringing this issue to them, have started supporting it.
Speaking of some diplomatic success, there has been a negotiation going on in South Africa between the federal government of Ethiopia and the TPLF, and then the AU played a crucial role in bringing those two parties to sit and negotiate for peace. So that's also, in concomitance with Ethiopia's insistence and commitment to African solutions to African problems. So my question, Ambassador, would be, what does this mean in general to Ethiopia and in Africa?
Well, it means a lot to both Ethiopia and Africa. Ethiopia, as a country, has successfully had successful tour in this diplomatic venture, whereby it has been proposing all those African solutions to the problem in the northern part of Ethiopia, and that has been realized. It means peace to Ethiopia. It means stability to Ethiopia. It's a big breakthrough. It means security to Ethiopia. It means creating conducive situations for the socio-economic development for Ethiopia. For Africa as well, it's a lot because it is Africa will be vindictive in the sense that there is a realization of the fact that African problems can be solved by Africans themselves. It's the African Union that led this process in South Africa. It is successful. It's a breakthrough. It's also a big lesson to the rest of the world that Africa can handle its own problem by itself. And it's a big time incentive for African continent, for Ethiopia as well, that Africa can take care of its own problem by itself. And this is a time to really celebrate, and it's a momentum to be kept and to be capitalized on as well.
Speaking of keeping the momentum, how do you think the African Union, could sustain this peace deal between these two parties?
Yeah, definitely we hope it is because they have continued and there are outcomes, and definitely we'll see the conclusions. But still, the momentum has been kept, and there is a progress. There is a dialogue going on. Some in one of the African countries as now, and this means this is a big time. It's a big time to watch. It's a big time. It's an exciting time.
What does this mean for Ethiopia? Because Ethiopia, as we've discussed, consistent in issues of resolving, has been insisting that African Union should play the leading role in resolving and coming up with solutions. So, what does it mean for Ethiopia? I mean, again, setting precedent in this respect.
Well, Ethiopia has a huge track record in Africa. As you know, the decolonization of African countries has a lot to do with Ethiopia. Ethiopia had big time support. It has given diplomatic and military support for the decolonization of African countries. Ethiopia has also an outstanding contributions for the creations of the Organization of African Unity, which is the one before the African Union. That is why its capital is still in Addis. Ethiopia has played also a very significant role in the peacekeeping process in Africa. Now also this new initiative of, you know, giving African solutions to African problems is being headed by Ethiopia. Ethiopia has been a test case here. And it has proved the idea of giving African solutions to African problems had been proved in Ethiopian case. And this is a big historic opportunity for Ethiopia, and it means Ethiopia is shining in Africa.
This should have been a kind of question that I should raise earlier, but have there been any instance in previous times where the African Union played a role that it played like in resolving the conflict in northern Ethiopia? Can we mention any test cases, as we've said, or cases of AU coming up with a solution in Africa?
Well, AU has been always making attempts to somehow find the solutions for the African problems. But as you know very well, some of the African problems are being exacerbated by the external pressures. And some of them have this sign of using the ties of the colonial periods. And so Africa has been tried, AU has been tried to intervene in conflict areas and bring solutions. There are partial successes somewhere, there are full successes, there are failures as well. And you cannot conclude that if AU doesn't have a role or AU has successful role. It's medium outcomes that we have been noticing so far. But AU is always there.
It's very, very good to see Africans themselves coming up with a solution to problems.
But this one is a unique, this one is
Unique.
an outstanding one,
Sure.
this one is historic,
Sure.
this one is unique.
True.
Yes.
My final question, Ambassador, would
Yes.
be what do you say to our fellow Africans to once again try to come together and then try to solve our problems?
What I say to African fellows, African brothers and sisters is that let us learn from the current situations. Let us capitalize on this moment. Let's keep this momentum. Let's always stick to African solutions, and let's always rely on our continental organization, which is ours, which we belong to it. Let us strengthen it in all aspects, and let's rise to the occasions of being African.
Ambassador Dina, thank you very much for your time, for your insights.
Thank you very much as well.